Right, so let's continue the talk about IoT and blockchain and what the two can bring to each other. Here we have a slide about data ownership and provenance. And the idea here is that a device publishes a hash of the data that it produces on a blockchain, and it writes the data to a database. And what's more, it encrypts that data, and then later it can publish a key on the blockchain that a data consumer can use in order to check the veracity of the data in the database and also decrypt that data so it can use it. And this allows owners of IoT devices to actually have a mechanism whereby they can sell their data rather than have a centralized authority just do whatever they want with it. So it gives users control back over the use of their data. And so that's an area where I think blockchain is going to be of great value in the mid to long-term future for IoT. Let's do a quick SWOT analysis of blockchain as it applies to IoT. So first we have the strengths. The great thing about a blockchain solution is cohesive. There are a whole bunch of areas that it applies that will be useful in the future. It's transparent, and we're seeing society moving towards more and more transparency. And finally, a blockchain gives you digital tokens for free. So effectively you can build a currency and a value exchange on top. On the weaknesses side, we have the fact that blockchain is unproven, and taking on any new technology always involves a risk, especially for the innovators and leaders. However, that also means that they can capitalize on any future value that is produced. The biggest weakness, I think, for blockchain and IoT is that it reduces the value of the data, which is that instead of a company controlling all the data and being able to monetize it fully, you're giving ownership back to the data owners, and therefore you're reducing the value of that data to the company that's managing the system. You're handing some of the value back to the owner. And finally, another weakness is that there's no real lock-in. If you have an open system where people can move in and out as they please, you can kind of end up in a situation where you've reduced the activation energy to move to such a low level that you can't get that advantage that traditional companies have of people staying faithful to that company, basically because it's too much of a pain in the neck to move on. Opportunities for blockchain at the moment involve publicity, and that there's still a lot to be gained in terms of PR if you launch a successful blockchain solution. And I'm seeing a lot of talk about blockchain and IoT, but I'm not actually seeing any action yet. Another opportunity is the fact that you can collaborate nicely. You can actually bring on board other parties. So if there are a number of the smaller companies or companies investing less in cloud IoT, they can actually group together and use a blockchain solution to solve some cloud IoT problems, and maybe as a team stand a chance of competing with some of the bigger players. Finally, another opportunity is developer appeal. Developers there are a lot out there who would like to get involved with blockchain, and having a blockchain IoT project may mean you can attract some really good talent. And finally, threats. There's poaching, which is that you set up as a company a cloud IoT system that's based on a blockchain. Somebody else can come along and effectively hijack that blockchain by doing what you're doing better. And because it's an open public system, there's nothing you can do to stop them. Then there's the risk of government regulation. Governments are slowly getting to grips with blockchain, and who knows what decisions they'll take in the future about them. And finally, blockchain does not equal data security. There are risks of breaches, and there are new forms of breaches that are going to turn up that we're not aware of at the moment. Database breaches are familiar and are usually down to user error or poor security policy implementation. Blockchain brings a whole new landscape for security risks. So that's the quick SWOT analysis. And looking at that, you would think, why would you bother implementing a cloud IoT solution? And here's that question. Does the business model make sense? No. Well, I don't think it makes sense to the big players. I don't think it makes sense to Google or Microsoft or Amazon to adopt a blockchain cloud IoT solution, because they do very well out of the traditional model. However, if you're looking to disrupt the big players, if you're a small player and you want something that gives you an edge over them, then I think blockchain and IoT make perfect sense. Because at the moment, all the second tier or third tier companies that I mentioned are basically looking to get a very thin slice of a large, very lucrative pie, leaving most of that pie to those big 3 or 4 players. But just consider this. Why not instead create a whole new pie that people move to, making the old one less valuable and making sure that because you're the first one in there, you get a large, if not almost all, of the slices of that pie. So from my perspective, blockchain plus IoT makes sense to companies like Accenture or Cisco or Arm or Bosch, any of those companies that, as far as I can tell, are currently heading towards an also-ran status. So that's my opinion, that's my take on blockchain and IoT. I think it offers a great opportunity for latecomers to actually leapfrog over the established players in the field. I'd be very interested if you have any comments on this, any takes, what have you learned from this, and particularly other areas where you disagree with me. So if you want to have a debate or discussion, please feel free to engage in conversation with me in the comments below. Thank you very much, and that's it for this talk.